All right. Hello, everyone. Hello and welcome. My name is Sarah Hollenbeck, and I'm the co-owner of Women and Children First. We're one of the last remaining feminist bookstores in the United States. And we're so honored tonight to be co-hosting this event with Access Living and the Disability Culture Activistm Lab, or DCAL. And tonight we are celebrating the release of Crip Kinship by Shayda Kafai. We're thrilled to have Shayda in conversation with Seeley. So please join us and settle in this virtual world. We're going to begin this virtual event as we begin our events held in the physical store with a land acknowledgement. So please join me in acknowledging that the land on which our bookstore stands is the unceded territory of the Peoria, Potawatomi, and Miami people. There are over 75,000 Indigenous people living in Illinois, and we strive to recognize and honor Native literature and community. We encourage you to learn more about land acknowledgements and the rightful owners of the land where you're viewing tonight's event. And going beyond land acknowledgements, we also encourage you to get connected with the folks on the ground in your communities who are the Land Back initiatives and Indigenous-led organizations. For us, we uplift the work and collaborate with the American Indian Center of Chicago. I also want to offer an image description of myself. I am a white woman with loose curly brown hair that doesn't quite reach my shoulders. Tonight I'm wearing a black V-neck shirt. There's a gray wall behind me. Also notably, I am disabled and have a partial facial paralysis, which means that my eyes are always a little bit closed and my mouth is always a little bit open. I'm now going to pass the mic on to Brianna, who is incredible, and she's going to talk a little bit about Access Living, as well as tonight's exciting book giveaway.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Hey, everybody. My name is Bree. My pronouns are she, her. A quick image description of me is I am a white woman in my early 30s. I have longish, wavy brown hair. I am wearing thick black rimmed glasses and a kind of orangish sweater tonight. And I am in a room with a big bookshelf behind me and a bunch of books all over it. So welcome tonight. I am here as one of the arts and culture coordinators at Access Living. And we are a part of the Access Living Arts and Culture Project. So a quick description of what we do is we promote innovative art, support new and established artists with disabilities. We develop new audiences and increase public access to disability arts and culture. We also provide lectures, poetry readings, music, dance performances, discussions, as well as art-based personal exploration, workshops, dance, performing, all the great stuff in the arts. And we also host kind of a sub organization or group within the arts and culture department called DCAL, which stands for Disability Culture Activism Lab. And we partner with the Department of Art Therapy and Counseling at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. And we are a platform for creative advocacy projects and disability allyship training. So we are very happy tonight to co-sponsor this event with Women and Children First Bookstore. And we are also sponsoring 6 books that we will be giving away to audience participants tonight. So we'll talk more about that as we get rolling, but essentially we're going to ask some folks to put some questions in the chat or ask some questions and to our lovely author here. And then we'll do a wheel spin at the end of the night where we'll spin the wheel, a virtual wheel, and pick 6 lucky winners to get a free copy of Crip Kinship. So that will be pretty cool. Thank you so much for coming tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bree. I also want to say thank you to our incredible ASL interpreters. Kate is on the screen now, and later tonight, Rivka will be joining us as well. And thank you to our live captioner. We really appreciate everyone who's making tonight's event accessible. All right, so Women and Children First, if you're in Chicago, we're now open at limited capacity for in-store browsing, but we also continue to offer curbside pickup, and we ship anywhere in the United States. Our events will continue to be virtual for the end of the year, and hopefully hybrid in 2022. A few notes, as Bree said, please put your questions for the authors in the chat. Not only does it help us feel your energy, but it is also a way to win a free book. So put those questions in the chat, and then Celia will read your questions to Shayda later in the event. I will also be putting a link to pre-order the book. The book is actually, a Crip Kinship is not available yet. This is an advanced copy. But when the book is available, we will send out your pre-orders. So please pre-order the book from Women and Children First. I'll put that link to buy in the chat. And I think that's all the housekeeping notes. So on to the main event. Shayda Kafai, she, her, is an assistant professor of gender and sexuality studies in the Ethnic and Women's Studies Department at California State Polytechnic University. As a queer disabled mad femme of color, she commits to practicing the many ways we can reclaim our body minds from systems of oppression. Shayda's writing and speaking presentations focus on intersectional body politics, particularly on how bodies are constructed and how they hold the capacity for rebellion. From discussions of madness and disability to femme politics and crip art, Shayda works to reframe our most disempowered body minds as vehicles for change making. Shayda is also an art maker and co-founder of Crip Femme Crafts with her wife, Amy. They make art that empowers all of our body minds, particularly centering the magic and joy that comes from wisdom and beauty of disabled, fat body minds of color. Seeley is a trans disabled performer, writer, facilitator, and environmentalist, working in literary and body-based composition and curation. Here in Play Script, Crooked is at the intersections of disability and drama, in work featured in Buddies in Bad Times Rhubarb Festival. I just want to say how much I love this book. The heart of Sins Invalid beats so clearly in the stories and the histories in Crip Kinship. I so appreciated the focus on the collective and the invitation towards fierce creativity to not only radically imagine a world where all of our body minds are honored and valued and protected, but also how to pursue that world. So please join me in welcoming Shayda Kafai and Seeley Quest.
Thank you so much for that beautiful beginning. Hi, Seeley.
Hey. Hi, Shayda. Are you good to introduce yourself?
Yes, I am good. Hi, lovely people. My name is Shayda. I'm an olive tone skin femme. I have like pixie black hair that the bangs go to the left. Today I'm wearing these miniature book earrings that actually have pages that actually open. I'm wearing a cozy gray V-neck t-shirt, and I'm in my aunt's living room. It's kind of like a light green background, a beige couch with glittery silver pillows, and then curtained to my left.
Thank you. I will also introduce, I'm Seeley Quest. I use the pronouns she and her. I am a white trans androgynous person with short cut hair, a little bit of longer bangs to the side. I'm wearing a black hoodie with a green and blue plaid scarf over it. It's pretty bare white wall background behind me with a bit of red fabric behind the space where I'm sitting. I would just like to also mention that I'm joining the event tonight from Montreal, Canada, also traditionally known as Jojage, or also as Munyang. And so pleased to be connecting with this narrative and all that's continuing to bloom out of the history of Sins Invalid. So thank you, Shayda, for all of your spirit and commitment with this.
Thank you. I mean, I went through my emails, and I think you and I exchanged emails and spoke about Sins Invalid like maybe in 2010.
Could be. It's
yeah,
been
it's either 2010 or 11, and yeah, it's just lovely to be in like actual digital space with you.
Likewise. Well, first I would just say I'm yeah, I'm wondering what's something that you've learned since the process of, well, two parts of this, since the very process began of starting this book work, something that you really were not expecting to be learning about your own relationship to it. I'll start with that.
That's a really good question. You know, I think one of the biggest lessons that came from this work from me was realizing, one, learning about what Crip-centric liberated zones are, which is, you know, Magic and Wisdom from Patty Byrne. And, you know, it's a space where people are self-actualized, but you're understanding yourself in community. It's a space where through healing and celebration, which is often connected to storytelling and art making, we enter free of oppression to be made known to ourselves again.
Mm-hmm.
And I think once I learned about that space, I was able to ask myself if I even occupy and live and have the privilege of working in those spaces. And when the answer was often no, what did I need to do to move toward that? Because I think one of the most important things that came out of that conversation with Patty was that it's not necessarily like solely an aspirational place, it's a place we manifest. So what would that look like in daily life and in work life and production of writing and all of those wonderful things that we do? And so learning about that space and that it's a possibility for us now, for all our body minds now, was one of the biggest, most profound gifts, because then so many other things were able to come from that and grow outward from that.
Yay.
Yeah.
That's it, right? Like we have to be claiming this and enacting it in confidence, you know, in without shame. And I love how your work is already, and even more so now, going to help kind of circulate this teaching further.
Yeah, I mean, I think because, and I guess this is an outgrowth of that, but because you reminded me of it now, I think because we've been told really rigorously, like disabled, mad, chronically ill folks in particular have been told very rigorously that their stories don't matter, or that their stories should be told by the folks around them. And I'm thinking mainly like medical industrial complex, our stories told via our doctors and things like that. When I then spoke to Leroy F. Moore Jr., and he said, actually, our stories are a form of activism. I mean, that was such a powerful lesson also, that if we create these Crip-centric liberated zones, we can think about the most intimate gestures of ourselves, which are our stories that are often so frequently devalued. Like, we can think of those as very powerful generative spaces that we offer to community, to ourselves, and to folks who've maybe never considered the value and worth of Crip stories, Crip lives.
Is there any particular maybe extra saucy or extra just, you know, landed in you moment that you would want to speak to of yeah, of somebody who's kind of demonstrated that or helped like put forth this a really shining, I suppose, example of it?
I love that you said saucy, because several things are popping in my head right now. So thinking specifically around examples of storytelling, I'm thinking about, I forget the year Nomi Lamb did this, but the piece was called Wall of Fire. I talk about it in the book. Do you remember?
I think it was 2007. I think it was Nomi's first year, with mine too. Yeah, I think it was back then.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, I'm thinking of that piece in particular. I'm thinking of that piece in particular because it was one of the first pieces I saw. So I originally came to Sins Invalid watching performances at home on my computer, right? Before I was able to go to San Francisco. And so that was one of the first performances I saw in general. And because of that, it's the first performance that always sticks out in my mind as an example of how disabled folks can retell the stories of their bodies and reclaim all of the different elements that have been made foreign to us. And so the piece is very much about not just re-empowering the body mind, but rendering it sexy and worthy of pleasure and worthy of beauty. It's very much cripping all of the very toxic sizest lessons we've been taught about what a beautiful, loving body is supposed to look like huge air quotes around that. So it was really one of the first times I learned about the potential of performance and the potential of storytelling in that very intimate way. And then the more I saw of Sins Invalid's work, the more I realized that it's every artist, every performer really sharing these intimate stories and moments of realization that they had come to with a larger audience. Yeah, so that's the first one that comes to mind.
But this arc, you know, and the layers of all these people's fire and and that coming off the stage as well, it's really important that there's not just an understanding of the stage performance-based work. Yes, it's how things started, but the way that you're helping to further the work be coming out in, you know, more formalized educational settings, in encounters that are conversational and, you know, not strictly in a performance space. There's something about this spark, right? That's like and this fluidity of relationship between the putting, you know, getting ourselves in front of audience, sharing our work with each other in that one kind of way, but how much more that makes possible then, and how the kind of reciprocal feeding of all of these ways to be empowering each other artistically, socially, sexually, spiritually, etc. You know, all the layers of that. Anyway, I could just go on.
Yeah, no, so first of all, these spaces zoom by so fast. So yeah, I mean, like I just looked at the time and I was like, oh my God, it's already almost half an hour. You know, one of the things that I think, I love that you're saying it's the performance space and it's the stage, and there's more places where the resonance of the work that Sins Invalid does happens. And I think for anybody that sees their art, whether it's online or it's in person, I think we are invited to take those elements of disability justice and weave them into, or integrate them into, our daily living and practices. Like as you were talking, I was like, yes, what does it look like to take what we see in that space and apply it to other locations? Like that was the first thought that I had when I went to see a performance live in person, you know, and just realizing, wow, like our classrooms need this. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
well, you're already taking it out in your crafts business as well, right? Like you're coming up with all the different ways that you can be living in these zones, you know, on campus, off campus, in the performance zone, out at home, in your home space, and so forth. So I would love if you would just say a bit about disability justice, something you've learned about it that has, let's see, supported you in building work that you want to.
The biggest word that just popped in my head is vulnerability. And that's informed through the principles of interdependence, which is so key to disability justice, and wholeness and sustainability. And I think of the word vulnerability because so much of what I first learned and gleaned off of disability justice after reading the primer, after reading the disability justice primer, was an empowerment that particularly disabled folks of color, disabled, transgender, non-conforming, queer folks of color, we deserve to state our needs, which I thought was incredibly radical and profound for me. Yeah, especially because there are so many different systems that tell us, number one, not to do that because it's a sign of weakness, but number two, that certain needs of certain folks get privileged. And And so disability justice was really the first space where vulnerability and the embracing, and not just embracing like for ourselves, but sharing our needs with other people without shame or fear of shame, was something that we should lean into. That was for sure one of the biggest moments for me as I was learning about it.
Blessed be.
Right? And now it's like, you know, I'll talk about vulnerability in class spaces and people are like, what? We can talk about that here? Yes, we can talk about it everywhere, as we should. I remember like, oh, this was an event that happened last summer. It was the Movement Generation like series, education series. And, you know, all of these different organizers were brought on and they were to imagine that it's the year 2050.
Yep.
And yeah, and what do you want to see in the year 2050? And so Patty was interviewed for Disability Justice. And she said, you know, in the year 2050, there are care stations on every block. And like, if you need somebody to, you know, to provide you with food, or if you need a place to sit, there are chairs everywhere in the year 2050. It's kind of like, we don't have to ask for our needs to be met. Having needs met is like worked into the built environment. There's no shame involved with asking for what you need, being fed, having our children watched, like all of those elements that disability justice is advocating for. And so when I heard that, I was like, yeah, like it starts with Crip-centric liberated zones outward. And how magical would it be, right? Yeah, I see Sarah wrote in the chat. Yeah, like how magical would it be to enter into a space like that and to cultivate a space like that? Yeah, and then for me, the root of all of this just keeps coming back to vulnerability as like disability justice magic, like 101.
Yes. There's yeah, there's just so much beauty in, you know, all that you're saying now, and also all the craft and care that you put into kind of gathering different elements and reflecting on them in your book. And I was hoping you could, yeah, share a bit from the book about this power and the meaning of storytelling and what a kind of transformative power it can have.
I always have to take a deep breath when I hear that it resonated, because I'm telling you, like, y'all were in the background when I was writing. Yeah, so that means so much. So I also just got my advanced copy today, which I am thrilled about. So yeah, I'm just like, you know, my love came in and she's like, I think it's in this bag. And I was like, really? And it was. So this is chapter 4. It's called Storytelling as Activism as Crip-centric Strategy. And here we go. When Leroy F. Moore Jr. and I spoke in 2016 about the importance of storytelling, especially for the artists that perform with Sins Invalid, he emphasized that they are putting voice and movement to the narratives that are difficult but most necessary to hear. He said that Sins Invalid becomes, quote, the place where we can finally tell our stories as brown Crips, as queer Crips. It's where we can tell the stories of our ancestors. This storytelling is cultural activism. Many of these stories are hard to swallow, but they need to be. I think some people see storytelling as, oh, it's pretty and it's a really good story. But there are also hard stories that shape our foundation that need to be heard, end quote. Storytelling as activism becomes remembrance, becomes genealogy. Sometimes the stories we tell about our body minds are the ones full of grit and sweat. The painful stories, the I have never said this aloud stories, the this is the most vulnerable I have been stories. Because stories can uncover and give voice to those who are unseen, marginalized, and forgotten, Leroy positions storytelling as an activist act. In this conversation of activist storytelling, I need to evoke Chicana lesbian feminist Gloria Anzaldúa and her rebellious, moving, jerking, wild tongue. In her book, Borderlands, La Frontera, she reflects on her tongue's active resistance while at the dentist. Quote, "My tongue keeps pushing out the wads of cotton, pushing back the drills, the long needles. I've never seen anything as strong or stubborn," he says. And I think, how do you tame a wild tongue, train it to be quiet? How do you bridle and saddle it? How do you make it lie down? End quote. As I reread this passage from this place informed by disabled, queer of color liberation, I think of Gloria's wild tongue as metaphor. We, the disabled, queer of color many, have always existed. We are the tongue. We are persistent in being heard. We exist willful even when our own communities render us invisible and silent, even when our stories remain untold. The wild tongue represents our endurance and creates new routes and new ways of thriving. This lesson of fortitude for Sins Invalid arrives when we gather and tell our stories. Storytelling in this way becomes our vulnerable tenacity to continue despite.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Just want to make a note of to everybody here of Shayda's poetic practice. That's that's happening as well, and yeah, and just how rooted it is that you're linking these kind of heritages and inheritances from the many other artists, activists, ancestors also that you bring in your whole text, and just an appreciation of the way that you situate, and you're really trying to make this context for Patty and Leroy and all of the people who, you know, first started birthing this, and you know, what are the lines that they and each of us continue participating in. So thank you for boldly sharing your own poetry as part of the ongoing zone making, world building.
Oh, Seeley, I love that. You know, I see Caesar in the chat said, I love it story, and I read love story. This was for sure written as a love story to community, as a love letter. You know, and I adopted So originally when I started writing, I was very overwhelmed and like, why are we citing people? Like, why do books have so many citations? This is super overwhelming. And, you know, I have a lot of citations in here, but I talk about citations in the introduction as a part of, and in the way that Sarah Ahmed, who's a queer of color scholar, says, like, citations are a feminist queer practice of saying whose voices you're connecting with, or like what lineages are you aligning your story with. And Sins Invalid was the first time I saw like art, theory making, activism produced by disabled people of color. And a lot of the work they did in their disability justice primer, especially the second edition, is saying this is the lineage. Like, this is the original map of disability justice that brings us to this contemporary moment. So because that was done, this citational practice became super important, but also very like an essential part of this. Like, we have to name who our ancestors are that make us resilient and that inspire our work.
Are there any folks in your life in the last several years of your work on the book who you would name as part of your flow of influence in particular?
Oh yeah. So if I was in my home office, I would just like turn my computer now so y'all could see, but I built, because I was writing as an anxious person, right? I was writing from a place of doubt. And so I needed grounding for every day, but especially for this project. And I have a picture of our now ancestors, you know, Stacy Milburn, Gloria Ansel Dewan, Audre Lorde, looking at me. So their work, Stacy's ideas, and Audre Lorde and Gloria Ansel Dewan's writing and like weaving in of poetry. And so I was like, oh my gosh, you felt and you heard the resonance of poetry. They were at me, at my desk with me, whenever I sat down to write.
Most wonderful. I'm wondering if you have if you could say a bit about when you are sharing some of what you have learned in taking this kind of depth study into Sins's work. When you're sharing that with people who are new, haven't spent all the time with the background and the impact, what's something that has, you feel like you've really noticed it's shifting? Could be for you, could be for the people that you bring this to.
That's such a good question. These are fabulous questions. You know, it's happening a little less and less each semester. But I always talk about disability and disability justice, regardless of the course. And one of the first things that people bring up is the newness of the idea that disabled folks, so whether we're thinking about ableism or saneism or autism, that disabled folks are oppressed and there are systemic forms of oppression that they experience. And so I'm noticing that more and more folks have heard that word and are aware that we need to talk about these forms of systemic oppression. But the majority of folks, it's the first time that they're hearing about not just the oppressive part and the ways that our society really marginalizes disabled folks. It's also the first time that they learn about disability in a positive context around like disability pride or mad pride. And so I think I'm imagining this like parting of two ways. It's kind of like disability justice is rooting out in multiple directions, and it's teaching folks about the ways in which oppression, whether we're thinking of like ableism or colonialism, how oppression influences the ways we treat disabled folks, but it's also teaching us about the pride element and the politicization of our disability identity and how, I mean, this comes up all the time. Like folks are surprised, like disability is not a bad word, you know?
Exactly.
And so I feel like those are like two big areas informed by disability justice that come up in the classroom. And, you know, after learning about the movement building work, I share with my students on the first day of class, they're being taught by a disabled math person. And what does that mean? And why is it important for them to know that they have disabled faculty, right? So yeah, I see those two elements kind of linking up together really, really, really effectively.
Shucking off that shame.
Yeah.
Sharing
Oh my
the
God.
torch. Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know if this was the case for you, Seeley, but like very long path of unlearning for myself and then like having to unlearn
Mm-hmm.
my own internalized ableism
Mm-hmm.
and then my own internalized saneism to arrive to a place of saying, I'm a disabled math professor and this is why it's important. Yeah, long path.
Good on that. And I'm so happy that you are doing it and putting your bodacious, powerful self and your work out, linked up with all the many wonderful comrades from our history and our future, and certainly our present. I want to just also say, really, don't be shy to the people who are partaking of this right now. Please do leave some questions in the chat. We're happy to have Shayda speak to things that you might be wondering about. So questions are invited.
And there's potentially free books attached to the question.
Hey.
Which magical. And I sent over signed book plates, which like I can't be there in person, but double magic. So yeah, if anybody has questions, I mean, Seeley, you've set the tone, right? This is a very loving and compassionate space. And I shared in the room before we joined with everyone, like I was super anxious, my palms were sweating, but as soon as the conversation started, I felt very held.
Well, guess what? It's mutual. And also, just while folks might be thinking of a question, they might, be letting go of their shyness about asking. Just, I want to also note that, Shayda, your commitment around working with an independent small press publisher, and to be really doing promotion with independent bookstores as well, and just really make a note on the value of that, as someone who also worked in independent bookstores in the San Francisco Bay Area for over 12 years. You know, it means something. I am really happy that your book work is going to be, you know, carried forward in this relationship with publishing house, with store entities that are putting value into relationship that is not about depersonalizing and commodifying our experiences. So thank you.
Thank you for that. I mean, you know, I haven't shared this here, but the first version of this project was for a dissertation, which was so disconnected from community, because that's what the system dictated. And so in thinking about the next version of this book 2 years later, it was like, yeah, it has to be a social justice press. It has to be written in a way that's accessible. And yeah, like when I started searching like for places to read, like I Googled feminist bookstores USA, and arrived here. So yeah, I appreciate that so much. Ooh, Bridget, thank you so much, Bridget.
Yeah, so great. I'll just quickly name it. Bridget has put in the chat, wanting to hear more about what's included in the book. And Shayda, from your perspective, what are the book's most powerful stories and why?
Ooh, okay, this is a fabulous question. So the way it's laid out after introducing the origin story and the ways that I invite you to read the book, it starts with an introduction of Crip-centric liberated zones, and then it's broken up into chapters exploring what those zones give us. So there's a chapter on storytelling as activism, which I read the excerpt from, how art making is a way we can leave evidence. A chapter about Sins Invalid's education work. And then the second half of it is looking at the gifts they offer. So if those are the modalities of Crip-centric liberated zones, you know, storytelling, making art, how does that manifest in online spaces? Because at least for myself, Sins Invalid gave me so much powerful rooting during the quarantine, at least in the Los Angeles area. There's a chapter on Crip sex and pleasure, which is so necessary and important. A chapter on beauty as liberation for Sins Invalid. And then like, how do we take all of this and manifest collective access and liberation in our futures, which are the last two principles of disability justice. And yeah, it starts with what do we need to know before we go into this? And the invitation is to just, it was written in a practice of care, which I share, and I invite y'all to move through it slowly and take breaks as you need it. And the very, very last sentence is, may you, dear one, write the next book and the next as we continue to move together toward our collective body-mind liberation. So it's like starting with you and then launching you forward to see what you might create after learning about Sins Invalid and disability justice. Thank you for that question.
Yes. Prompting the legacy.
Yes.
Well, I want to also pass on a great question from Anne-Marie about what would you say about the future of disability and mad work, how you might see things for this future, and to say a bit about how work in your fields, what it's meaning to you as a scholar, also as an activist.
Hello, Anne-Marie. I'm so glad you're here. I think, so this is from my experience and what I've noticed on my campus, but also in the context that Anne-Marie and I know each other. We worked with other math scholars, and I feel like there is much more safety, although it's not perfect and it's not 100%, but I feel like there is more safety in discussing disability and less safety in discussing madness. Because I think if I just like close my eyes and call forward stereotypes that are aggressively woven under around madness, and I'm not capitalizing it as in like the pride identity symbol. I think that those stereotypes are so regressively still attached to our body minds. And for that reason, it took me a very, very long time to disclose. And so I envision, both in terms of scholarship, but also in terms of activism, I envision a similar application of disability justice to mad politics, which I haven't seen happen yet, at least in like the stuff I've read. So that's almost like if disability justice in the disability justice primer, the authors say that the map of disability justice hasn't been written yet. It's a yet to be map. So I imagine and I dream up, because dreaming is activism, from Talila Lewis. I dream up applications of disability justice to mad activism, mad scholarship. Yeah, those are some of the thoughts that first pop into my head. Like, what would that future making look like through the context of disability justice? Yeah.
Yeah, more work to be done, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you for the question.
My apologies. I want to shout out for a moment. Sandy Yee, hello. Much love to you and all the Chicago people. So Sandy asked a question to the chat. That many academics are co-opting this term, disability justice, in their work without doing groundwork with people who are in the movement, and suggestions that you would have for those of us teaching students and working with colleagues who are using, quote, disability justice as a trendy and fancy term.
Oh my. I mean, first of all, yes, that is absolutely happening. You also made me think just about the word diversity and the word access that has been repeated without any of the politics behind those words. So when I think about how folks can use this language of disability justice without stepping into the co-opting cycle that's happening, I mean, the first and foremost, right? If disability justice's principle is to center the language and labor and wisdom of the most marginalized, if you are not teaching, just thinking about like academia, since you started it that way, like if you're not teaching the work of the most marginalized who've done this work, it's not disability justice, right? And there's so many phenomenal resources now of there are so many phenomenal resources now of podcasts. So I'm thinking of like Alice Wong's Disability Visibility podcast, where she's interviewed so many disability justice activists. I'm thinking of the primer. There's so many resources. And I think also centering and making sure that folks are centering the writings and the knowledge production of folks of color queer, gender nonconforming trans folks. If you're not doing that or offering that, it's not disability justice. If you're not talking about like ableism and at the same time thinking about white supremacy and colonialism and how it intersects, you're not doing disability justice. You're just like, exactly like you're writing, you're just using this word because it's something that you've heard, but maybe you're not practicing. And I think going back to one of the comments you made, Seeley, earlier, like disability justice doesn't belong on the page. You read about it, but it has to be practiced.
Mm-hmm. True this.
Yes.
Well, there's a couple more last questions and notes coming in here. Wow, people are going ahead with it. I'm glad you got inspired. So Jessica asked the question, are there certain things that would be helpful to know or to understand before reading this book, Crip Kinship?
Oh, lovely. Although it is written for queer disabled folks of color, I make it super clear that it's for everyone, even if you're just hearing the word ableism for the first time and you're wondering, what is this about? And so there are let's just say a robust number of footnotes at the end with lots of definitions. So it's written for folks that might have a lot of access to all of these like words and concepts, or maybe not. And so as you read, somebody gave a lovely review where they said that they read and they would go back to the back of the book to read the footnotes or the endnotes rather, just to learn more definitions. And that it didn't feel too oppressive. And I was like, yay, okay, that's great. But no, I don't think there's anything you need to know before you jump in. Just go at your own pace and know that everything is defined in the back of the book if it's not in the text.
Okay. Let's see, I'm gonna try to see if we can cover a couple last questions.
Sure.
Other reading and resources and practices recommended? Maybe one thing to tag on there is ways people can just follow your work and kind of learn more and be in contact, be in touch if we don't, get every single thing answered tonight.
Oh yeah, I'm so open, y'all, to answering questions and providing resources off of this beautiful space. Instagram is a really good way to connect. So if you direct message me and ask a question that wasn't answered here, I shall give you resources. I've created PDFs of like, somebody asked an awesome question of like, other than Alice Wong's podcast, what else can I read? And I would say Mia Mingus has a phenomenal blog called Leaving Evidence, but there's so much more that I've turned into a PDF that I can send you as well.
Sweet. Hey, Jen Allen, I see you left a chat question also, so great. Maybe, okay, quick site, let's put this out there, and I think this might be a good one to close for now. In many social justice movements where youth are making huge strides, creating new norms, what are you seeing from the upcoming generation in disability justice that's inspiring you?
Oh, that's such a beautiful closing. You know what I am seeing, so just for reference, I teach at a Cal State, and from my undergrads, I'm hearing folks that are queer, disabled, of color, creating, like going to our Pride Center and realizing there isn't anything here for like disabled, queer, gender nonconforming trans students. So we're going to create our own group. And then the same person is like, I'm a journalism major. Why don't we have any podcasts about this? I'm going to make my own podcast. And so I'm seeing people identify the need at a much younger age than I did. And that's exciting to me.
100%. Same here. Well, I want to respect that the bookstore hosts need to do some closing and exciting reminders to folks of how to get a hold of this book. So there's a message that's just come in the chat. I'm wondering if there's someone who wants to make any kind of concluding announcements. But especially I want to say, Shayda, again, congrats, how great and how really sweet to get to be in some conversation with you about this.
Thank you so much. Thank you for calming my nerves. Thank you for being an amazing conversation partner. Let's not forget to take a picture at the end, but I see Sandy says we have some books to give away.
That's right. All right. So maybe someone could give a little reminder of how that is functioning.
Mhm.
Oh, great. Spinning.
Oh.
Nice.
Hello, everyone. This is Sandy speaking. I am presenting this virtual spinning wheel on behalf of Access Living. We do have 6 books to give away, and I have added everyone's name. I took myself out just because I'm one of the hosts, but everyone, if you are on this spinning wheel, basically you get a book. So we have Jan A, Bree, Jessica, Anne Marie, Ellen, Bridget, and Scissor. So congratulations. Since 6 people are all here, we don't have to do a spin, but just in case if you want some thrill from the spinning wheel, here it is. All right, thank you everyone. And if your name were on this wheel, please private message me with your mailing address so we will be able to send you the book. Thank you everyone.
Thank you, Sandy. That's so loving. I appreciate that so much. Thank you, audience members, for just being so supportive and lovely and asking great questions.
Yes, thank you all for that incredibly warm and just heart-forward conversation. I really loved just closing up and listening in for the last hour. Thank you everyone for joining us this evening. For those of you who didn't win a book tonight, but would like to support one of the last feminist bookstores in the United States, you can pre-order the book, Some Women and Children First. Crip Kinship officially publishes on December 7th, but I heard today that we get copies sooner than everyone else. So order today and we should be able to ship those out to you. If you're not in Chicago, by next week. And if you're in Chicago, come say hi and pick it up in person. Yeah, that was so wonderful. Thank you to our ASL interpreters. Thank you to our captioner, part services. That was incredible. Thank you to Seeley for your wonderfully warm questions. I feel so invigorated actually after listening to you. And thank you, Shayda, for this gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous book.
Thank you all so much. Again, Seeley, like big hearts from the Los Angeles area. Thank you all so much. Sarah, thank you. Thank you, Sandy. Thank you, Bree. ASL, Cart. Can we take a picture really quick?
Yes.
Okay, one.
Been there, Sandy. Hey.
Thank you all so much. Have an amazing night.
You too. Much love.
Much love.
Bye, y'all.